situation. We were like half in and half out because they wanted us to stay in the house until we close. So we thought, well, we don't have any other place. We got to go because we are closing Friday on our house in Monday. So we got to have somewhere to go. So we were like half in and half out. We didn't know what to do. It was like,
we were doing the hokey pokey.
Yeah.
No, that's when you turn yourself about. All right. This is Joel, right? And should be another test that you've gotten today on this little book. And so that's right. We're on verses 9 through 17, first of all. All right. Hopefully you've got your sermons in. Need to be working on them. Let's get them done. Okay. All right. I know I probably haven't. I've looked at some and everything. So anyway, look at some more. Got to go through my email. I got lots of emails and I got to put them in a proper place. But anyway, let me tell you too, Joel chapter 2, verses 28 through 32. That's the only memory verses that you have in the book of Joel. Work on that before you do the test. All right. That's a word to the wise. Know where that is found and how it's used. That section. Again, a word to the wise for the test. All right. To me, that's where I want to put my emphasis all in this book. Okay. Others important, but this is just what we're talking about. Oh, there would have been another good question. I missed that one. Oh, man. All right. Verses 9, chapter 3, verses 9 through 17. Proclaim this among the Gentiles. Prepare war. Wake up, the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. And let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves, and come all ye brethren, and gather yourselves together around about. Thither calls thou mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be awakened and come to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full, and the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decisions, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. I should have made that one of the memory verses too. The sun and the moon should be darkened, and the stars shall be darkened, and the stars shall be withdrawing their shining. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion, and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. Ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy, and there shall no stranger pass through her any more. There's been some good questions on a test right there. Okay. All right, now let's go back and talk about verse 9. Proclaim ye among the Gentiles, prepare for war. God has always had the Gentile nations ready for judgment. He's preached to them, and you can go to Isaiah, you can go to Jeremiah, you can go to all these other books, And God has always told them there's going to be a judgment. He's never then judged them without first declaring. Jonah, okay, was told to go preach to Nineveh, that great city. Now, I don't know what he preached, but he did go preach to that city after he just decided to do some other things. But here's the Gentile world being held accountable to God. So when we say the Old Testament, the Gentile world was not accountable to God, we need to be extremely careful because God held them accountable. And that's what he's telling him, prepare for war. All right? Because of the mistreatment of his people, that's talking about Israel, they need to be ready for war. Two. Yes, I am recording. Thank you. I appreciate that. I sure do. Helping this old man out. All right, now look what he says. Beat your plowshares into swords. Now what's Isaiah say? Let's go over to Isaiah 2. Let's see. I saw it. Yeah, there it is. Verse 4, and he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares. Now, what's he say? Oh, plowshares into swords. Well, isn't that what he said here? No, backwards. Beat your swords into plowshares. So this is opposite of what the kingdom will be in Isaiah 2 and verse 4. The call of God is urgent. Isaiah 2 and verse 4. God's call is urgent. Okay. The heathen then. God's going to use the heathen to destroy the heathen. But he's going to have them then in judgment. So when the Spirit is descending, this judgment is taking place. Go back to verse 1. It says 4. That's the connecting then. In verse number 13, he's talking about the judgment. And two figures. One is the harvest, and the other is the press overflowing. You know what the press is, don't you? This is the olive press.
Now, you're saying the judgment is the harvest?
Yes. Okay. Use two illustrations here. The harvest and the press overflowing. This is judgment against the enemies of God's spiritual kingdom. Multitudes in the valley of decision. When you get a multitude together, what do you have? Do you not have noisiness? And then tumultuous, diverse crowd gathering in this valley of judgment. The day is approaching. It is divine determination. And then verse 17 tells us why. So that all will know that God is over the nations. Isn't that what Daniel chapter 2 says? All right. And holds everyone responsible. That's what he's talking about, dwelling in Zion. We talked about that before, I believe. Dwelling in Zion, where my holy mountain, that's Isaiah 2 again. And Jerusalem, and of course, Zion is a mountain in Jerusalem. And that's where God's dwelling place will be. Or, well, where his kingdom will begin. God's kingdom cannot be shaken. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 28. It will stand forever. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44. And be delivered to his son. There's another good test question.
First thing you said was God's kingdom, something Hebrews 12:28.
Cannot be shaken. Now, when we talk about God's kingdom, what are we talking about?
The church.
That's right. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. All right. Verses 18 through 21. And it shall come to pass in that day that the mountain shall be dropped down with new wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and the rivers of Judah shall flow with waters, and a fountain shall come forth of the house of the Lord, and shall water the valley of Shittim. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom will be desolate wilderness for the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall dwell forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. For I will cleanse their blood, and I have not cleansed. For the Lord dwelleth in Zion. All right. It shall come to pass in that day. That's talking about the same time period as above, the time of the multitudes and the valley of decision. And so it shall come to pass in that day, needs to be taken into context. And in verse 18, it's talking about all the blessings. Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 3. All spiritual blessings in heavenly places are in Christ. Blessings are overflowing in the kingdom. Colossians 2:10 and Ephesians 3:19. Egypt is not innocent. Now, I want you to listen to something. Egypt is not innocent. They killed babies, Exodus chapter 1 and verse 2. If God held them accountable, what about the United States and abortion today? 1 and 2. Where are we going to be in God's judgment for abortion? Okay. Now, Edom, you've got to know where Edom is. Edom is in the south of the land, and you really need to get a visual of what takes place here. Going into this where Edom dwells, this is the land of Edom, and it is a narrow passage to get to this place. And they thought they were impenetrable because the only way to get into this is through this narrow passage. You can't ride a horse. You have to walk your horse through this area. And so they thought that they could just stand guard right there and defeat anybody that came in to them. Now, you've got to look at the city of Petri. And you need to get an archaeological book and notice this, but it is, then they hewn out places to live in the red stone. Have you got a picture of it? Oh, okay. No, you have a map. Okay. Yeah, but you need to get a picture because that's not doing the visual. It is beautiful. And they thought they were impenetrable. And God says, you're not as indestructible as you think you are.
They used it a lot
That's right. All right. So his judgment is going to come upon them, and they will be held accountable. All right. Yeah, for the book of Joel it is. Now, what did we find out about Joel? All right. What's the message of the book? Man, I've missed a bunch of questions on this. One of doom, then the ultimate glory of God's cause. What's he using in this book to show God's judgment? Locust. That's very good. Very good. Very good. All right. Very good, Justin. All right, now let's turn our attention to Amos. Let's see. We have the rest of tonight and three more classes to talk about Amos. All right. Amos. The meaning of the name is burden bearer. Burden bearer. If you don't have a copy of Homer Haley's The Minor Prophets, you need to get that. Okay. That was supposed to be your textbook anyway. That's a good book. All right. Notice the man next. We have the meaning of the name. That'll be important. The man, he was a shepherd. Okay. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And yet he was a great reformer in Israel. He saw the conditions of the day and was indignant at the corruption within the nation. Israel was corrupt from top to bottom, politically and spiritually. Let me look at something here. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Amos is speaking about the evils and pointing out they are doomed on their present course. When he uses illustrations, he's using illustrations that he's familiar with. And this will make sense. Like a shepherd, he's using illustrations that a shepherd would use, and a dresser of sycamore trees. He was using that. And let me give you some of them, some of these illustrations that he talks. He talks about the roar of a lion. Now, there aren't lions over there, but during this time, you remember David killed lion. He killed bear. Okay? And they were still there in Amos's day. He talks also, that's number one. Number two, he talks about rescuing sheep. Number three, he talks about consolations. Number four, he talks about the eclipse of the sun. Why would he know about the consolations and the eclipse of the sun?
He said consolations or constellations?
Constellations, I guess. the movements of the stars. Why would he know that? The Orion and the Pleiades. What was he? What was his occupation?
He's a shepherd out at night.
Yeah, be out there at night and he'd see that Big Dipper and the Little Dipper and all those Orions. All right, what about the eclipse of the sun? Would he not see that too because of his occupation?
Well, and animals will be distracted.
All right. Number 5, the meeting of a bear. If he met a lion, he heard the roar of a lion, he'd meet the bear. David did that as a shepherd. Number 6, being bitten by a snake. Number 7, the folly of horses running on rocks. I wish my computer would do a better job of spelling. Oh, that's supposed to be Waddies. Your computer won't make mistakes like that? The way Waddies would run during the rainy seasons. The way Waddies would run during the rainy season. Well, that's my question. What is a Waddy?
I'm thinking something like I want to think of a part of it.
No, it's not an animal.
It's not an animal.
It's not an animal.
It's not an animal.
No.
Human?
No,
It's a plant.
no. We're playing, what is a 50? It's a wet weather stream.
Oh.
Okay, when the rain would come, then these things would overflow with water. Okay, and being a shepherd, he would see that.
I had this whole image, you know, the Dr. Seuss thing. Like the Who. Okay, you said it's run during a storm?
During rainy season.
During rainy season. Man, my notes are terrible. Okay.
Separation of the wheat and the chaff. Not the shaft, chaff. You got to understand, we'll talk about this in just a minute, but when Amos wrote and when Joel wrote are about the same time, and that's important. But notice, because he mentions the idea of Edom, but Tekoa is home. That's his next point. The next is his home. Is Tekoa. Look at verse 1. It says Tekoa. It's located 6 miles south of Bethlehem and 12 miles south of Jerusalem. So if you go to your maps and you find Jerusalem, which is into the top of the Dead Sea, and you go 12 miles south, what are you going to find? You're going to find Tekoa, but you're going to find a very rugged country. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in this area. No, it didn't say that. So this is very rugged country.
Dead Sea Scrolls are found in a cave, right?
Yes, but there'll be caves in this area. This is, I mean, super rugged area. The city is 18 miles east of the Dead Sea.
Of course, I spelled Tacoma like Tacoma, Georgia, you know.
Well, Tekoa.
I see that now. T-O-C-C.
Okay. Occupation. He was a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore trees. He had 2 occupations. Number 1, and a dresser of sycamore trees.
What do they do?
Get to there in just a second. The herdsman indicate that he was a herdsman of a small, rugged type of sheep. Noticing where he lived, they'd have to be adapted to that, and so, yes, bred for that area. The wool is special and superior in quality and great value. Ready? Okay. The sycamore tree was found in the lower altitudes. So Amos would roam this country. He was a very rugged man. I think that's his speech declares that he was a very rugged man. J.D. Tant would be like that. The fruit, they're talking about sycamore fruit, is a fig-like fruit. Sweet and watery. It is eaten by the poor people. So it wouldn't be high quality type. Date of the book is 755. Now that can go 5 years either way, but we're going to put it at 755 BC. So if you find that on the test, that's going to be the answer, 755 BC. This was during the days of Uzzah, king of Judah, and Jeroboam II, king of Israel. Okay. King of Judah.
Jeroboam.
And Jeroboam II. If you go to your chart that I gave you, okay, you find Hosea, Amos, and Joel, all during that same time. So there's some overlapping. They each want to have a special place and special group of people that they are to go to. Now, conditions of the time. Very luxurious. Let me show you. Chapter 3 and verse 12, he talks about a couch. 12 talks about a couch. Now, why is that luxurious? All right, look at verse 15 of chapter 3. They had a winter house, a summer house, an ivory house, and a great house. How many houses do you have?
None right now.
Okay.
Wait, winter, summer, ivory, and great?
Yep. So how many houses is that?
4.
So,
Well, they had to pay back.
all right, 4 houses. You got upkeep on those houses. I wouldn't think of the taxes. I'd think of the upkeep. I understand it. I was thinking of, just keeping the house, repairing stuff, like the kitchen faucet. In 4:12, he talks about the kine of Bashan. Kine, chapter 4. That's not right. That's 4:12. Prepare to meet thy God. Let me look and see if I didn't do something there and convert that. It's in chapter 4.
What is it?
Verse 1.
Is it verse 1?
It says here,
Yep.
this word ye
Yep, sure is. Thank you. Somehow, again, my computer is just not acting right today.
What are we talking about?
Kine of Bashan. Kine, cow.
Cows of Bashan.
Okay. And if you look at that and read that, he's calling his wife a cow. Or he's talking about the women. He's calling the women And this would be a luxurious item. Okay.
Okay.
When you're bringing in cows from other places, that's, you got money to spend. So don't go home and call your wife a cow.
No, that would be a bad thing.
Don't even call her a heifer. That ain't good.
Oh, I'm not one.
Huh?
I'm not a heifer anymore.
I understand that. All right. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 7, we find there were feasts with revelry, songs, music, choice meat, and the best wine. Revelry, songs, music, choice meats, and the best wine. All right, whatever next is, we're still under the conditions of the time, the treatment of the poor by the rich. And this is probably one of the reasons, not probably, this is one of the reasons why they were called into account. God will hear the cry of the poor. All right, there's covetousness.
There's another one.
Yes. Injustice. Immorality of the people in power. Did you get them all? And covetousness, injustice, immorality of the people in power. All right, next. And let me talk about this. Their worship was corrupted. Look at chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. Come to Bethel and transgress. At Gilgal, multiply transgressions and bring your sacrifices every morning and your tithes after 3 years. And offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving with leaven. That's an impossibility. When God gave them, leaven was not supposed to be a part of their, but they were doing it. And proclaim and publish of the free offerings. For this liketh you, O children of Israel, saith the Lord. He was not pleased with their worship. It was corrupt. And this is why then he says in verse 12, prepare to meet thy God. All right, we use that as a lot of times. O Israel. We need to be prepared to meet God. But he's telling them to prepare to meet God because of all this corruptness that was going on. You need to go back and read Leviticus to understand that the leaven was not to be a part of their worship. All right, his message. Was one of doom. He presents a worldview of God. Look at chapter 4 and verse 2. And the Lord God hath sworn by his holiness. So God swears by himself. That in chapter 6 and verse 8 says the same thing. The Lord has sworn by himself. Oh, again, my computer messed up. 7.3. Repented. I'm going to get me a new computer. Well, this was making too many mistakes. He repented. God repented. Chapter 7 and verse 3. The Lord repented for this. It shall not be, saith the Lord. What does it mean to repent? Change your mind. That's what he's talking about when God is a change of mind. Notice in chapter 9, verses 3 and 4, he commanded, though they hide themselves in the top of Carmel, I will search and take them out thence. And though they hid from my sight in the bottom of the sea, thence will I command the serpent, and he shall bite them. This is also talking about the omnipotence, omnipresence of God. Yes, omnipresence of God. Okay. Verse 4, he says, I commanded. Thence I would command the sword. But this is, and I'll get into that. All right, he talks about the omnipotence of God. Whatever. Omnipotence. All powerful.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's good like that.
He is. He's smart like that too.
Smart like that.
Okay. He talks about his control of nature, chapter 4, verses 6 through 11. His control over nations, chapters 1 and 2, and 9, 7. Again, he talks about the nations round about him, so he's holding them accountable. All right, and here's the omnipresence of God, 9, 2 through 4. That reminded me of Psalms then when he said, if I take the wings of the morning, behold, thou art there. If I go into the uttermost parts of the sea, even there. So that's what he's talking about, the same language, pretty close. In chapter 4, verse 13, he knows what man thinks. Mercy is also taught in this book. That would be an attribute of God. 7:2 and verse 5. 7 verse 2 and verse 5. And then also there is the idea of seeking God. Chapter 5 and verse 4. Thus saith the Lord unto the house of Israel, seek ye me, and ye shall live. What's Isaiah say? Seek the Lord while he may be found. Also look at verse 6, chapter 5 and verse 6. Seek ye the Lord. And verse 8, seek him that maketh the 7 stars of the Orion and turneth the shadow of death into the morning and maketh the dark ones. Okay. Huh? Yeah, but I don't have that. The seeking God, though, is what I have. All right. Lessons from the book. Number 1, justice between man and man is one of the foundations of society. Did I say divine foundations? That's one of the divine foundations of society. Need to put divine in there. Number 2, privilege implies responsibility. Israel had enjoyed special privileges, therefore she was given special responsibilities. What was her privilege? That's right. And what was her responsibilities then?
To preserve the lineage,
All right.
preserve the
How were they going to?
bloodline
How were they going to do that?
by intermarrying and not marrying outside the tribe.
How about keeping God's commandments?
Well, that's one of his commands.
Yep.
That's the only reason they were his children.
So they were to be pointing the other nations to God, and they weren't doing that. They were accepting their gods, the other nations' gods, and they weren't. And see, they were to be unto themselves, and they were to show them God's people. But understand, they did marry other folks. Ruth is a part of that. She was a Moabite.
She was good for him.
Yes. What about Rahab?
Mm.
And guess what? They are both in the lineage of Jesus Christ, Gentiles. Something else about that, and I'll throw this in, won't charge any extra, that's one of the, when you study Matthew chapter 1, the lineage of Jesus and the number of women that are mentioned in that lineage.
And she was mentioned, but not as Bathsheba. She's mentioned as the wife of
For
Uriah.
Uriah. That's right.
Always as the wife of
Of Uriah. That's
even
right.
though she married David after she.
That's right. Number 3. A failure to recognize and accept responsibility is sure to bring punishment. Failure to recognize and accept responsibility is sure to bring punishment. See, they didn't recognize and they didn't accept their responsibility. Number 4, nations, and thus individuals, because what makes up nations? Individuals are obligated to live up to the light and knowledge granted to them. Nations, and thus individuals, are obligated to live up to the light and to the knowledge granted to them. Number 5, the most elaborate worship is but an insult to God when offered by those who have no mind to conform to his commandments. The most elaborate worship is but an insult to God when offered by those who have no mind to conform to his commandments. God does not want elaborate worship, to tell you the truth. Go back and understand, when they were to make an altar, it was not to be an elaborate. When they were to gather those rocks, they weren't to take a hammer to it. And they were to leave those rocks as they were, and they were to build that worship. It was a simple type of worship.
You say those who do not have a mind to obey the commands of God?
Conform to his commands. You look at our worship today. Do we need a fancy building to worship God? Do we need fancy pews and air conditioning and light and all this kind of stuff?
Makes it more expedient.
No, we don't need all of that. Yes, it does. It makes it nice to be able to come into a warm building or a cold building. I know.
Why do you have to have a tray and pick up the collection? Some dump at the bottom.
Well.
Preach.
Because God said, here's the way, and there is an expedient way to get those things done.
He is a God of order.
That's right. That all things be done decently and in order. So we have an order to our worship. Needs to be ordered. But I'm still saying it doesn't need to be elaborate. Okay? Needs to be from the heart. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So here is your attitude when you worship God. And that's what happened during Amos's day. We'll get into that in Amos chapter 6, how that they were polluting God's worship, and God had had enough of it. So there were several contributing things to their demise, and one was the treatment of the poor. Number two, it was...
Brother, can you back?
Can I do what?
On me. Would you mind backing up just a little bit? I didn't catch that.
About what?
The last thing I got was about how modern worship does not need to be elaborate.
Oh, me. I said a lot of things between there and there. His worship needs to be done decently and in order. That's 1 Corinthians 14, verse 40. But it doesn't need to be just overflowing with elaborate. We need the building, and there's expediency in those things, but it doesn't need to be just, it needs to be done. I think I mentioned John 4, verse 24. It needs to be in spirit and in truth. And so our hearts and our minds need to be in it.
What caused the demise
Oh, the demise
of
Israel was one because of their worship. It was, and the number two was the corruption of the worship and the treatment of the people. And God always held them accountable for those. All right, we're going to quit for tonight. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, treatment of the poor, right?
Yeah.